My wife created 20 new marriage rules, so I added just one rule that ended her control system collapsed instantly. Update 1. The list was waiting for me on the kitchen counter when I got home from work, typed up, laminated, and placed next to my dinner plate. 20 new marriage rules were written across the top in bold letters. At first I thought it was some kind of joke, but the serious look on her face as she stood, arms crossed by the refrigerator, told me everything I needed to know. "What's this?" I asked, picking up the laminated sheet. "I think our marriage needs more structure," she replied, her tone leaving no room for discussion. "These rules will help us both know where we stand." I scanned through the list, my blood pressure rising with each absurd demand. Rule 1. I needed to share my location at all times. Rule number 4. All purchases over $50 required her approval. Rule number 12. I had to text her hourly updates when I went out with friends. The list went on, each rule more controlling than the last. We've been married for 7 years, but the last 6 months had seen a gradual shift in our relationship. It started with small things, comments about my friends, suggestions about how I should dress, questions about where exactly I'd been during the day, but this was something else entirely. "You can't be serious?" I said, placing the list back on the counter. "I'm completely serious," she replied. "My friend's husband follows a similar set of guidelines, and they've never been happier." I looked at her, really looked at her, and realized I barely recognized the woman standing before me. The person I'd married was supportive, kind, someone who valued my independence as much as I valued hers. This person wanted to monitor my bank account, screen my calls, and dictate who I could spend time with. "I need time to think about this," I said, keeping my voice steady despite the anger building inside me. "There's nothing to think about," she countered. "These rules go into effect immediately." I noticed her phone light up with a message. She quickly turned it over, but not before I caught a glimpse of the group chat she had with her friends. I'd seen enough to know she was updating them on her progress with me. That's when it clicked. This wasn't about our marriage at all. This was about control over about showing off to her friends, how she had her husband wrapped around her finger, all those lunch dates with her new friends from the country club, all those women with their perfect Instagram marriages. It was changing her, or perhaps revealing who she truly was. I didn't argue further. Instead, I calmly ate dinner while she watched me, expectantly waiting for me to break, to plead, to negotiate, but I wouldn't give her the satisfaction. My mind was already working on something else entirely. Not how to follow her rules, but how to end this game, once and for all. As I finished my meal, I smiled at her. A smile that clearly confused her. She expected resistance, tears, anger, anything but calm confidence. She didn't know me as well as she thought. I wasn't going to fight her. 20 rules with 20 counter rules, I didn't need 20 rules. I only needed one. The next morning, I decided to study the list more carefully. Each rule was more absurd than the last. Rule 6 demanded I share all passwords to my accounts. Rule 9 required her approval before I made plans with anyone. Rule 15 stated I needed to check in with a photo if I was going to be late from work. Rule 17 limited my gym time to 1 hour 3 times a week, always when she could verify my whereabouts. These weren't marriage rules. This was a prison sentence. With conjugal visits, I watched her getting ready for her weekly brunch with her friends, applying makeup with meticulous precision. Her phone buzzed constantly. I casually picked it up to hand it to her, making sure to glimpse the screen. The group chat was active. "Can't wait to hear how he took the rules. My husband would never stand for it." "You're so lucky," said another. So that was it. I was becoming a trophy in her social circle. The trained husband who jumped through hoops on command. The thought made me sick. "Your phone?" I said, handing it to her with a neutral expression. "Thanks," she replied, then paused, studying my face. "Have you thought more about our new arrangement?" "Still processing," I answered calmly. 20 rules is a lot to take in. She seemed pleased by my apparent submission. "You'll see. This will make our marriage stronger." After she left, I sat down and analyzed the situation. Strategically, this wasn't just about control. It was about public perception. She wanted to show her friends she could domesticate her husband completely. The question was, when had our equal partnership become this power struggle? I recalled how 6 months ago she'd started spending time with the wives of her boss and his business partners, women who boasted about controlling their husband's every move, women who measured their worth by how thoroughly they could dictate their marriages. My wife had always been independent and respectful of boundaries. Now she was becoming someone else entirely. I decided to play along temporarily. That evening, I acted contemplative but not confrontational. I let her believe I was considering her demands. Meanwhile, I observed her closely. She texted updates to her friends throughout dinner. "He's coming around." I caught her typing. No real resistance. Easier than I thought. The casual disrespect stung, but I maintained my composure. This wasn't about ego. It was about reclaiming our relationship from whatever toxic influence had poisoned it. Over the next 2 days, I watched as she started enforcing small rules. She reminded me to share my location. She questioned a $60 purchase I'd made. She called twice when I was having lunch with a colleague. Each time I responded with minimal resistance, enough to seem like myself, but not enough to trigger a confrontation. All the while, I was formulating my response. I knew that arguing against each individual rule would bog me down in endless negotiations where she held all the power. I needed something simpler, something elegant, something that would cut through the entire charade at once. On the third night, as we sat down for din, she placed a rule violation notepad beside my plate, another new addition to track my infractions. "Do you have something to say?" she asked, clearly expecting me to finally break down and beg for compromise. "Actually," I said, meeting her gaze steadily, "I've been thinking about your rules quite a bit, and I've decided to add one of my own." Her eyebrows shot up with surprise, then narrowed into a suspicious glare. "Your rule?" she asked, as if the concept was completely foreign. That wasn't part of the plan. "Every relationship needs balance," I replied calmly, setting down my fork. "You've had time to think about what you want from this marriage. I've had time to consider what I want too." I could see the calculations happening behind her eyes, trying to determine if fighting this would cause a bigger scene than she wanted. After all, her whole strategy depended on maintaining the illusion that I was willingly accepting her control. "Fine," she said, finally, crossing her arms. I took a sip of water, maintaining eye contact for the moment needed to land with proper weight. "My rule is simple. Every rule you create for me applies equally to you. No exceptions." The color drained from her face. "That's not how this works. It's exactly how this works now," I responded, my voice level but firm. "Location sharing goes both ways. Financial approval for purchases, same limit, applies to you. I hourly check-ins when you're out. I expect the same courtesy." "But my friends, this isn't about your friends," I cut in. "This is about our marriage. Either we're equal partners or we're nothing." She shifted uncomfortably in her chair. "Some of these rules don't make sense for me." "I'm not the one who what?" I challenged. "Who needs monitoring? Who can't be trusted? Is that what you think of me after 7 years?" She didn't answer, just stared at her plate. "Here's the implementation plan," I continued. "Starting tomorrow, we both follow all 20 of your rules, plus my one rule of equality. If either of us breaks any rule, that rule is permanently eliminated for both of us. If you refuse to follow your own rules, then the entire system is dissolved immediately." I could see the realization dawning on her face. Her perfect control system was being turned against her. She'd have to live under the same restrictions she designed for me. "This is ridiculous," she finally muttered. "The whole point was to create structure in our relationship." "No," I corrected her. "The point was control, and I'm not going to be controlled." I reached for my phone and opened the location sharing app she'd insisted I install. "Let's start with rule number 1, shall we? I've turned on my permanent location sharing." I slid the phone across the table. "Your turn." She stared at the phone as if it might bite her. "I need to think about this." "There's nothing to think about," I replied, echoing her words from days earlier. "These rules go into effect immediately." Her fingers drummed nervously on the table as the trap of her own making closed around her. She had 3 follow her own restrictive rules: admit the rules were unreasonable, or refuse and expose her true intentions. "What happens if I don't agree to your addition?" she asked, trying to find a loophole. I shrugged. Then we have a bigger conversation about why you believe you should be able to dictate terms without being willing to live by them yourself. The silence stretched between us, heavy with implication. Finally, she reached for the phone and with visible reluctance activated her location sharing. Good, I said. Now let's discuss rule number 2. Phone access codes. I'll need yours just as you demanded mine. As I watched her internal struggle play out across her face, I knew the game was already changing. This wasn't about winning or domination. This was about resetting the balance that had been lost the moment she had to follow her own rules, the moment their true purpose became crystal clear. And that was exactly what I wanted her to see. The next morning brought the inevitable confrontation. She'd had time to regroup, to consult with her friends, to formulate a counterattack. "We need to talk about these rules," she announced as I made coffee. "I agree," I replied calmly. "Which one is causing you trouble first? The hourly check-ins? The spending limits? The social media approval process?" she said, her jaw tightening. "This isn't what I intended. You're twisting the purpose." "Am I?" I leaned against the counter. "Let's be honest. These rules weren't created to strengthen our marriage. They were created so you could tell your friends how well you've trained your husband." Her face flushed with anger and recognition. I'd struck a nerve. "That's not true," she protested, but her voice lacked conviction. "I just wanted more structure. Structure would have been a conversation between equal partners." I interrupted. "What you created was a power play, and now you're upset because I won't simply surrender." She switched tactics. "You're being childish. This tit-for-tat approach isn't constructive." "Then let's be constructive." I suggested. "Tell me which rules you find unreasonable to follow yourself, and we'll eliminate those for both of us." She hesitated, caught in her own contradiction. Admitting any rule was unreasonable would undermine her entire position. Yet she clearly wasn't prepared to live under the same restrictions she designed for me. "This isn't a negotiation," she finally said, trying to reassert control. "You're right," I agreed. "It's not. Either the rules apply equally or they don't exist. That's my boundary, and it's non-negotiable." Her phone pinged with a message. I raised an eyebrow. "According to Rule 16, all messages must be read aloud to your spouse." "Who is it?" She clutched her phone tighter. "This is ridiculous." "It's your rule," I reminded her. "Is it from the group chat? Are they waiting to hear how successfully you've implemented your control system?" The look on her face confirmed my suspicion. They were indeed waiting for updates on her domestic victory. "What exactly do you tell them about me?" I asked, my tone hardening. "Do you laugh together about how compliant I am? Do you compete to see who has the most obedient husband?" "It's not like that," she protested, but weakly. "Show me the chat," I said. Not a request, a demand. For a moment, I thought she might refuse. Then, reluctantly, she handed over her phone. I scrolled through the messages, my suspicions confirmed. With each swipe, the group's 6 women, including my wife, were indeed comparing notes on their husbands, ranking them on submissiveness, sharing tactics for control. "Congratulations," I said. "You," handing back her phone. "You're winning the competition for the most controlled husband. Unfortunately for you, I'm withdrawing from the contest." "What does that mean?" she asked, her voice small now. "It means I'm not playing this game. I'm not going to be the subject of your power experiment or the punchline in your group chat. I married a partner, not a warden. I reached for the laminated rule sheet still prominently displayed on the refrigerator and took it down. So here's what happens now. Either we follow each rule equally, or, starting with you sharing your group chat messages in real time, or we tear up this entire system and have a real conversation about our marriage." Her eyes flicked to the rule sheet in my hands, then back to my face, searching for weakness, for an opening to reassert control. She found none. "You wouldn't understand," she tried. "The other wives." "I don't care about the other wives," I cut in. "I care about us. And right now, there is no us. There's just you giving orders and the husband you think you can control." I placed the rule sheet on the counter between us. "Your move." Her strategy shifted over the next few days. cycling through every manipulation tactic in her arsenal. First came anger, accusations that I was being unreasonable, that I didn't trust her, that I was overreacting. When that failed to move me, she switched to tears, sobbing about how she just wanted to feel secure in our marriage. I remained unmoved. Security doesn't come from control, I told her as she dabbed at her eyes. It comes from mutual respect. When emotional appeals failed, she attempted to recruit allies. Her mother called, concerned about trouble in paradise. A mutual friend reached out to suggest I was being too harsh. I recognized these interventions for what they were, extensions of her attempt to pressure me into submission. To each would be mediator. My response was, this is between my wife and me. But tell me, did she mention the 20 rules she created or just my one? The silence that followed was telling every time. By day 5, she attempted a new approach, selective compliance. She agreed to follow some rules while arguing others shouldn't apply to her. I don't need spending limits, she insisted. I'm better with money than you are. That's not what our credit card statements show, I replied calmly. But if the rule is unfair, we can eliminate it entirely for both of us. That wasn't what she wanted either. Each concession undermined the control structure she designed. As predicted, living under her own rules was quickly proving intolerable. The breaking point came on day 7. She'd gone shopping with friends from the Rule Makers Club, without sending the hourly updates her own system demanded. When she returned home laden with bags, I was waiting. That's 7 rule violations in one afternoon, I noted, scrolling through my phone. No location updates, no hourly check-ins, no spending approvals, no social activity verification. I was busy, she snapped. You know who I was with. That excuse wouldn't work for me under your system, I pointed out. So it doesn't work for you either. She dropped the bags by the door. What do you want from me? To admit this isn't working? Fine, it's not working, she said. That's progress, I acknowledged. But I want more than that. I want you to understand why it's not working. These rules were never about strengthening our marriage. They were about control and impressing your friends. That's not fair, she protested, but weakly. Let's be honest for once, I pressed. Would you have created these rules if you weren't trying to compete with your friends, if they weren't comparing notes on how to control their husbands? Her silence was answer enough. Here's what bothers me most, I continued. Not that you tried to control me, but that you thought I wouldn't notice, that you believed I'd just accept being turned into a project you could brag about to your friends. She sank into a chair, the facade finally crumbling. They make it seem so easy. Their husbands just comply. Then their husbands have given up, I said. Or their wives aren't being honest about how those dynamics really work. Either way, that's not the marriage I want. For the first time since this began, I saw genuine emotion on her face. Not the calculated tears from earlier, but real vulnerability. What happens now? She asked quietly. I sat down across from her. Now we decide what kind of marriage we actually want. One where we're partners, or one where we're constantly fighting for control. I don't want to fight anymore, she admitted. Neither do I agreed. But I won't be controlled. Not by you, not by anyone. She nodded slowly, and in that moment I knew a fundamental shift had occurred. The power game was ending, not because I had won, but because I had refused to play on her terms. What about the rules? She asked. I reached for the laminated sheet that had started this whole ordeal. I think we both know what needs to happen to these 2 months have passed since the rule sheet. Way through the paper shredder, the sound of it being torn to pieces marked the beginning of something new between us. Not a return to our old marriage, but the creation of something stronger. That night, after shredding the rules, we talked until dawn, really talked, without power plays or hidden agendas. She admitted how her new friends had influenced her, how their constant competition over controlling their husbands had been seductive. She'd felt powerful being part of their circle, respected for demonstrating dominance in her marriage, but it never felt right, she confessed. It wasn't who we were. I just got caught up in it, she said. I shared my perspective, too. How I'd watched her change, how I'd felt betrayed by her attempts to control me, and most of all, how I'd missed the equal partnership we once had. The next day, she left the group chat. 2 days later, she declined the weekly brunch. By the end of the week, she'd sent a clear message to her former friends. Her marriage wasn't a competition, and her husband wasn't a project to be managed. The transition wasn't always smooth. Old habits die hard. There were moments when she'd slip back into controlling behaviors, testing to see if my boundaries remained firm. Each time, I calmly reminded her of our new understanding, not with anger or resentment, but with unwavering clarity about what I would and wouldn't accept. What surprised me most was how quickly the power dynamic rebalanced once I refused to participate in her game. The truth was, her control had only existed because I'd permitted it the moment I established my boundary with that one simple rule that what applies to one must apply to both. Her entire system collapsed. We've established new patterns now. When decisions need to be made, we make them together. When boundaries need to be set, they apply equally. Trust has returned gradually, built on actions rather than demands. We check in with each other not because of rules, but because we choose to. Last week, she received a message from one of her former friends. Her husband had finally rebelled against their control system, walking out after being treated like a subordinate once too often. Now, she wanted advice on how to get him back in line. My wife's response was simple. I don't have that answer anymore. What worked for us was treating each other as equals. Later that evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, she turned to me with genuine curiosity. How did you know that one rule would change everything? Because control only works when it's one-sided, I explained the moment it had to be reciprocal. It revealed itself for what it truly was. She nodded thoughtfully. You could have just walked away. Most men would have. Walking away was never the goal, I said. Restoring balance was. I didn't want to win a power struggle. I wanted to end it entirely. That's the lesson in all of this, I continued. In relationships, the person with the most power isn't the one who can impose the most rules or control the most outcomes. True power lies in knowing your boundaries and having the strength to enforce them. I didn't need 20 rules to counter her 20 rules. I didn't need threats or ultimatums or emotional manipulation. I just needed one principle applied. What's good for one must be good for both. In the end, that single boundary accomplished what no amount of arguing could have. It transformed our marriage from a power struggle back into a partnership, not by force or domination, but by simply refusing to participate in a game that was rigged from the start. Some might call it standing up for myself. I call it standing up for us, for the relationship we both deserved, rather than the contest she'd been pressured to win.